Hello and welcome back to Always Right with Chris and Terry. I'm Chris Thomas. This is the lovely Terry, the greatest co-host here. And we have some really sad, solemn news we're going to open the show with. And that is that,
Way to be a bummer, Chris.
well, we'll let the audience judge how sad this is. The
Okay.
left officially endorses the assault and battery of women at the hands of men.
I wish I
And
could be surprised by this, but I'm actually not. But go
I
ahead and
know,
tell me what.
and people watching might go, "Oh my God, the horror! That can't be true." It is true, and we're going to
Yeah,
talk
go ahead.
about it. We're also going to talk later in the show about a little bit more about the conflict in the Middle East, debunking some more propaganda,
Mhm.
and then we're going to look at some ridiculous TikTokers, as we always do to end the show. But first, let's stay on this topic here because what I just said is pretty shocking, right? That the
Yeah,
left
and
wants.
I believe true. I believe an accurate description based on what you've told me so far. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll repeat it again. The left wants to endorse the assault and battery of women at the hands of men. So what does that mean? We're going to go through it. USA Boxing has just announced
Mm-hmm.
that they're letting men compete as women in boxing matches. So we're not talking swimming or track, which is already horribly unfair. We're talking about a sport where you actually try to knock the other person unconscious with your fists. So we're going to go through the specifics about what a trans player has to do to qualify to be the other gender in the eyes of USA Boxing. But what's your initial reaction to that, Terry?
This is what concerns me is they call it leveling the playing field, but my concern is if we start to say that men and women can fight on equal ground, what happens outside of that, right? Now, I mean, my first thought is as an assault victim, if you're in court and you're doing a rape case, and the question is, well, why didn't you fight back? Now it's the expectation that somehow a woman is supposed to be able to fight off a man. I mean, this sets a horrible precedent because we will start to look at instead of going, that's a man and he can assault a woman because he's stronger than her. Now we're going to start dragging into court. Well, was he taller? Was it muscle mass? Was it
Yeah.
this? Was it that? And it's absurd. It's insane. Yeah, I
Really,
do not approve.
you're going to start having physical build or lack of become a mitigating
Yep.
factor for a rapist. That's really what's going to start happening.
I was gonna say, I mean, it is because you look at me, I'm 5'8". I'm much taller than the average female. I'm bigger than the average female. But the truth of the matter is any guy who's 5'10", even a guy who's 5'8", can take me out, no problem.
Exactly. And so let's go over it because people are going to say, well, it's about the testosterone. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the testosterone. Currently, I'm going to pull up the actual guidelines here.
Okay.
These are the guidelines for a boxer who's transitioning from male to female. In other
So
words,
they were born a male. I want to make sure I follow because this always gets me, I lose track. They were born a male. They are having surgery and taking hormones so they can live as a female
and beat the crap out of them. Yes.
and beat the crap out. Okay, so this is a guy going to a girl. Okay, I'm just trying to keep up because honestly, I get woo with all of
Yep.
this stuff.
Same here. So a guy who wants to be a girl so he can beat the crap out of other girls. So
Apparently, yes.
here's I want to hone in a little bit on the testosterone level. The
Okay.
athlete the athlete must be post-op. I don't really give a shit whether they're post-op. The athlete must demonstrate that they affirming the pronouns that her total testosterone level in serum has been below 5 nanomoles per liter. So you might think, what does that mean? Below 5 nanomoles per liter. Well, I'll tell you why
Well,
it matters.
can I just say real quick as a female, testosterone has never been an issue for me on anything. Yeah, as a female, my testosterone levels never get asked about. I don't have to confirm them. They're not relevant. So just so you know.
So people may ask, okay, what does 5 nanomoles per liter mean? Well, what
Mhm.
is the average for a biological woman, you may ask? And I'll tell you, the
Okay.
low end of average for a biological woman, so a real woman,
Mhm.
is zero point
Okay.
0.5 nanomoles per liter, and the high end of normal range is 2.4 nanomoles per liter. So what does this mean? This means if you are at 4.99, if you're a man who's pumped yourself with enough estrogen and demasculinized yourself enough to get down to 4.99 nanomoles, you still have double the testosterone of the high end range for real women. And you're going to step into a boxing ring with them.
And again, you and I looked at this sometime when I was going back and forth. This would be, but males just right off the bat, and this is unaffected by any type of hormone. Men have at least 10% more lung capacity than women do, which is why running. It was about running and cycling. That
Yep.
and even in boxing, of course, breathing makes a huge difference in stamina. So
Yep.
regardless, I mean, first of all, twice as much testosterone is absurd. And considering what hers is, it could be 3 times as much. But just on lung capacity alone, a man's stamina is going to outdo a woman every time. And testosterone and estrogen affect that not at all. Not at all.
Exactly.
So stamina-wise, that right there is an unfair advantage just because of the ability to breathe and process oxygen.
And studies shown, there's actually a study by, a study conducted by UCSF that showed that 75% of trans women, so these are men who become women, 75% of those individuals will not be able to suppress their testosterone enough to female levels. So even at the outset, it is unrealistic, and the data shows this, it is unrealistic that a biological man will be able to reduce their testosterone enough to even get within the upper range of women. And here you have USA Boxing saying you can have double the testosterone of a woman and you can knock the crap out of her.
They act like this is the be all end all, Chris. And so first of all, like we said, this doesn't affect lung capacity at all. So your ability to breathe is key to your ability to perform as an athlete. You have 10% more lung capacity. But also, men on average have 30%, 36% more muscle mass than women. Taking estrogen does not completely decrease your muscle mass. It moves fat around. But the thing is, estrogen builds muscle for women, right? So just because you have low testosterone doesn't mean you've lost all your additional muscle mass.
Exactly.
That's not the case. And also, it has nothing to do with bone density. Your bones are not going to be less dense, and men have more bone density in their hips and actually everywhere except the spine is kind of equal from what I understand. But these are things that give athletes a benefit: more muscle mass, stronger bone density, because getting hit makes a difference, right? And if your bone density in stamina alone, it's completely unrealistic to think that this in any way can level a playing field.
No matter how you square this, this is a death waiting to happen. This is a life and death issue, I believe, for women athletes.
Oh, absolutely. And again, the thing that disturbs me about this, and it bothered me about the UFC, is this normalizes men hitting women. And don't get me wrong, women should not hit men. But there is a huge difference between me swinging on a guy and a guy hitting me. This desensitizes society to violence against women.
And it won't even be conscious. That's the scary thing. You're not going to have people, young people, consciously saying, "Yes, I think it's okay for men to hit women." It's going to be in their subconscious because we're normalizing it on this subtle level in not a domestic violence situation, but in this situation where people have big viewership and they watch it and they root for people. So it's all going to be in the subconscious.
This plays into what I feel is the misogyny of the whole trans movement, men trying to be women and erase us, is now to desensitize violence against us and act like, oh, because I take some hormones, it's okay for me to beat women. This is literally normalizing them and trying to take away the idea of a biological female versus a trans person who says they're a female.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Now, as we know, gender madness, that's what I call it, and it is gender madness, It's wreaking havoc all over the country, we know. And
Yes.
there's no better cesspool of a place, I think, than
Mhm.
to highlight this gender madness than California.
The
And
third world state of California. Yes. It
exactly, the
is.
third world state of California,
Yes, it
absolutely.
is now a
Where,
third
guess,
world state. They
yep,
are
where
one dead body away from being a third world country.
the tax-paying citizens of California, as of January 1st of this year, are
Mm-hmm.
now going to be paying for the trans surgeries of illegal immigrants. Shocking, right?
What?
Actually, not shocking. There's nothing shocking about this because it's California. Um,
What?
yes, so
Oh
it's
my
true.
God! If
It's
I
true.
were in California, I would leave so fast. No.
This should be
Mm-hmm.
so unsurprising by now. But starting January 1st, all Medi-Cal plans, that's
Yeah.
the state's version of Medicare, will now cover
Yeah.
trans surgeries for undocumented immigrants. So the caveat here is if they've been here since 2014. Doesn't matter what their legal status is or lack of. If they've been here since 2014 and they've been a resident in California since 2014, we pay to lop off their genitals. We all know how many illegal immigrants came in during the Obama administration. That's probably a heck of a lot of people.
Is
And the
that why they're all
children,
coming here? Is that what's happening? Is that why we're getting this mass? Because it's mostly men, and now I'm wondering, is this thing they're like free surgery and
you just think there's some poor woman um, in El Salvador who wakes up every morning and says, "Hey, mommy, I want a double mastectomy," and
yes,
I know because I want to be a man. My breasts are healthy, but I want them cut off, and only through the American dream can I achieve that. And they start making
can
their way up. But really, I mean, what is that? Is that what they
I?
think the American dream is? That the
And
American
the thing is, so if people from California, they don't get it because I don't think they go anywhere, and they're like, oh, it's so great. First of all, California, because they're like, oh, we have a large GDP. Yes, you have a large amount of debt too. You have more debt per capita per person than any state, federal, state and federal debt. But not only that, their pension system for state employees is bankrupt. I mean, it's bankrupt. They are, I want to say, $1 billion in debt. Like they are short $1 billion to pay for pensions in California. You would think that would be the priority before deciding to pay to mutilate illegal immigrants who are here, or even legal immigrants, or anybody before the state pays for it. I would want my pension. If I didn't get to retire and get my pension because Donnie wanted to be Deborah, I would be furious. Look, put on a dress and tape it down. I want my retirement, okay?
So I was always again. I mean, I feel some type of way about taxpayer money going to anything objectionable, even if it's not something objectively wrong. Like I would even say, and this is true about myself, even back when I was a leftist, I felt some type of way about taxpayer money
Mm-hmm.
going to abortion. Even when I was on the left, even when I was totally fine with like unfettered access to abortion, I knew there were enough people that had really, really genuine feelings in the opposite moral direction, and I felt there was just something unfair about them
Mm-hmm.
having to pay for abortions of other people. I knew that was inherently unfair. Um, so, it just gets worse and worse though, because that's the platform of the left. We're going to fund our radical social agendas by reaching into your wallet. That's really what it's about.
Absolutely. And you have to think that there are, and this was one of the issues I had with giving money to Planned Parenthood, is there are people who oppose this for religious reasons. And I got into a huge argument on social media, on the TikTok this week, with a guy telling me that not supporting abortion is forcing my beliefs on someone. And my thing is, but you're literally forcing me to pay for something that
Exactly.
I don't believe in. You are
Exactly.
forcing, and I feel like the left has gotten to this place with, well, because we don't believe in religion and we're not forcing religion on you, it's okay to force our beliefs on you. No, it's not. Okay, I don't know what you want to call it, but your collection of beliefs, you still don't have a right to force it on me, and you're literally forcing me to pay for something that is against my religion and belief system. And
Yeah.
that's unconstitutional in my opinion.
Totally. And there's always going to be things that not 100% of people support. So, like, it's unrealistic to live in a world where we're only going to pay taxes on the things we like. I mean, that's just not a world we can live in. But we're talking about serious moral dilemmas on some of these issues. This isn't just, I don't support my taxpayer dollars going to opening this national or this state park in the next town. That's something that even if you don't see the need for that, you're not going to have a strong religious or moral objection to that happening, even if you don't support it. But we're talking about big moral conundrums here.
Well, and also that my thing is, I always look at when people argue with that is, are we doing something to benefit an individual or all taxpayers? And that's the argument with people. Well, I don't want to pay for the military. You can say what you will, but we do need a military, and there is benefit to the military. It provides jobs, it pays for education, it protects our nation. You benefit from it whether you like it or not. You can argue you don't want to pay for roads, but you drive on roads. The same with schools, the same with libraries. But when you are taking tax dollars from you or me and giving them to an individual, and it only benefits that individual, that's the issue I have. Right?
And by the way, for the record, if a conservative politician came up to me and said, "We're going to defund Planned Parenthood, but we're not going to lower your taxes. We're going to take the money that went to Planned Parenthood and we're going to put it into emergency rape and trauma counseling for women who have unplanned pregnancies," I would be fine with my taxpayer money going to that, because I think that would first of all, it would result in hopefully more babies being born, less abortions, but also help for those women. And I think there is a net, and some poor infertile couple somewhere who's going to get a child via adoption that they wouldn't have gotten. So I think I'm.
You mean they're going to traffic, Chris? You mean they're going to traffic a child?
Exactly. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, I went through a very traumatic human trafficking experience when I was young, via the adoption from South Korea that my very loving and amazing family
traffickers.
They paid for me and bought me and used and exploited me for years and years, and it's very traumatic to this day. I mean, I just have a great education, a great home, and great value system because of that trafficking, but it was still a horrible thing, and it should be outlawed.
People who loved and nurtured you, oh, the horror stories. Yeah, that's the new thing. I don't if people haven't heard that. The new trend is that adoption is just human trafficking, and I'm like, well, first of all, trafficking in and of itself is illegal, so no, it's not.
No, it's totally true. I mean, and speaking of atrocities of human nature, I know, Terry, you had some stuff that you wanted to talk about, and I'd love to pass the torch over to you for a second.
Well, so I just want to brag that I have gotten 2 people who want me dead on TikTok over this. And so I imagine that I'm probably, if anybody sees this or when people see this, if they don't agree, I'm probably going to upset some people. But the big thing and now Chris, I don't know if I told you, I will not be referring to the people who are out protesting and are against Israel as pro-Pallies anymore. I am referring to them as the Western wing of Hamas. So they're the Western civilization wing.
That's a more accurate term. So I support that.
So the West Wing, yes, the Western civilization wing of Hamas, or the Western propaganda wing of Hamas, stake a lot of their claim and hatred on Israel on the idea of the Nakba. And what they say the Nakba is that when Israel was founded, it came in, it took over Palestine, which for some reason they believe is a sovereign nation, and it wasn't. And it drove the Arabs who were there out of the land. And it took their homes and it murdered them and it turned them into refugees. And life has been completely unfair since that time. And that's why Israel is horrible. Now, when somebody first said this to me, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? My father was stationed in the Middle East. He hitchhiked all over. He's been to Syria. He'd been to Egypt. He'd been to Israel. He'd been to, all of the places all over there, met people and talked to them. And he was always very interested in history. Plus, he was a minister. So, of course, Christians have an interest in Israel. And he had told me about the founding of Israel. And he was like, so in 1948, the UN did or the UN had done a partition plan. Israel declared itself a nation. He said, and the Arab nations around it were like, no, thank you. We don't want any Jews in our neighborhood. They all lined up with the goal to destroy Israel. And they had let the Arabs there know, you need to leave. And because in the 80s, right of return was a big thing. He said, and the reason that, so they left. They left Israel. They gave away intelligence with the idea that they would return to an Arab-controlled country. And so the return is, well, we left, but we have a right to come back. And Israel's right was, well, no, you sided with the enemy and you supported them, so you don't have a right to come back here. Plus, Palestine has its own land and could have declared its own state. So I was like, did Israel cover this up? Like, I really, I questioned. It's been a long time. Did Israel cover this up? Did the United States cover this up? And so I started to really dig in it and do some research. And one of the things I found, and this is for those of you who have to argue with the Western propaganda wing of Hamas, is they will always say that Palestine has never had an opportunity to be its own. And so I have a map here. It's got a bunch of shiny colors in it.
I'll pull it up.
This map is from 1937. 1937. This is before Israel was founded. Okay. There it is. This is before Israel was founded. Okay. This map is the Peel Plan. This is from the British mandate that was over the land at the time when the Ottomans had lost the land in World War I. And literally the plan was to give 85% of the land to the Arabs who were there at the time. The Jews would take 15%, and they would split control, or they would have a disinterested third party over Jerusalem because that's such a contentious area. 1937, Chris, Israel wasn't there, right? And this was offered. Israel said, we're not thrilled with the split, but we'll come to the table and talk. The League of Arab Nations says, no, we don't want any part of this, and walked away. So when people tell you, oh, Israel came in and Palestine and everything, 1937, the land could have been Arab. This could have been an Arab state, right? Mm-hmm. So this was refused. And so they went with the UN partition plan. And so when Israel got their land, they declared themselves a country. And then the story has come out, that people are saying now, oh, they ran away and blah, blah, blah. But I really started digging into this. And one of the names that I came across was Konstantin Zurich. And Konstantin Zurich is a Syrian historian. Have you ever heard of him, Chris?
No.
Okay.
Don't make me admit I don't know something live on camera. How could you do that to me?
I'm sorry. Well, don't feel bad. Apparently, everybody in the Western propaganda wing of Hamas has never heard of him either. So Christian Zurich, he is a Syrian. He's Arab. And one of the reasons I always say that is because if you ever use any resource that has come from Israel or any Jewish area, the Western propaganda wing of Hamas immediately calls it propaganda. So I want to be clear. Konstantin Zurich was his name. Was a Syrian Arab and a teacher. He was also considered an intellectual. And he is the person who applied the term Nakba to what happened in 1948. So he has a book. You can go and read it if you can find it. It's a very old book. And it was actually written during a ceasefire, Chris. Like when the war was going on in 1948 between the Arab states and Israel, during the ceasefire, he wrote this book. And the book says that the great catastrophe, because Nakba means catastrophe, that the great catastrophe that was happening was that Israel was winning the war and they were going to be able to establish a nation. And he actually was pretty brave to put the book out there because he criticized the Arab leaders at the time because there was so much infighting and they couldn't get it together to be able to defeat Israel. So the man who called this the Nakba does not talk about anybody being driven out. does not talk about any slaughters. The man who wrote a book at this time is calling the Nakba. The great catastrophe was the fact that Israel was winning the war. That's it. So I was like, all right, that starts to make me think my dad wasn't insane, right? And that I haven't heard this whole story and the other people I've known for years. So I have some quotes, Chris, we can share. And these are quotes from Arab leaders at the time. These are the men who went to war with Israel and wanted to, quote unquote, drive the Jews into the sea. So one of the things they said is, we told the Arabs who were there to leave, just pack up and leave, and you will return to an Arab state. So again, not driven out, abandoned what they had, packed up everything they had, abandoned the rest, and left with the anticipation of Israel being destroyed. That's a huge difference than saying that the Jews invaded Palestine, killed all of these people, and made them refugees. That's not what happened.
Right.
Right. And so it has created this core belief of hatred. There is another quote in there where they talk about that they did this to the refugees of Arab. One of the Arab leaders said, I don't want to point fingers, but this was a failure on our part because we abandoned the Arabs that were there. We told them to leave. They did. We lost, and now they have nowhere to go. So they're literally, this is in the late 40s, early 50s, are taking responsibility for creating the Palestinian refugees. Yeah. And said, this is not Israel's fault. This is our fault. We ran and abandoned our own people, and now they're refugees, and that's on us. So when I started reading,
let me interject, Terry, for a second. So in your experience, I know your second career is fighting these people on TikTok. I mean, that's probably it's not maybe not
it's become that somehow.
It may not be your 9 to 5, but it's your 5 to 12. What do you see as the most typical kind of agreed upon consensus that's a set of alternative events to what you just described? What do they usually think happened?
They believe that Palestine was existing. Now, some of them will understand Palestine has never been a sovereign country. Palestine is just a territory. That's all it's ever been, right? It's never so, but for some reason they believe that Israel showed up, that they had been welcomed there by the Arabs. They were not. And decided and just declared, hey, we're going to be a nation, and drove all the Arabs out and slaughtered everybody who lived there and took their land and robbed their homes. And that is not what happened. And it amazes me that that lie has seeped into the conscience of so many people when that's literally not what happened. Israel was given land. Everybody who was there was offered the opportunity to become a citizen, Arab or not. And I wrote down the numbers earlier. I was looking it up. There was about 10 to 12,000 Arabs who remained and decided to become, I'm sorry, not 10 to 12, 150,000 Arabs who remained in Israel and said, yeah, we'll take citizenship. And right now, they're 20% of the population in Israel. They've stayed. They're Israeli citizens. They live there. But they decided to stay in Israel. They kept their homes. They kept everything. They were not driven out. But about 700,000 chose to leave and go somewhere else. And they left with the anticipation they would come back to a state that was controlled by Arabs, and the Jews would, as they love to say, be driven into the sea. But again, Israel offered everyone citizenship. And people left and declined it because they didn't want to live with Jews. This is, and that's the thing, is that the propaganda wing of Hamas over here will try to convince you this is about land. It is not about land. If it were about land, 1937, Arabs could have had most of the land and the most developed part of the land. That's the best land. When looking at that map, that's the most developed part of the land. And they turned it down because they did not want to share a border with Jews. The issue is that was their issue, right? We're giving you what, and the Jews said, well, we're not happy about this, but we're willing to come back and talk about it. And the Arabs said, absolutely not. If you give land to the Jews, we're not interested. So the idea is that Israel somehow invaded Palestine and took their land. That is not what happened. The UN created a partition plan. It gave Israel land. It gave Arabs land. Israel declared a nation and their independence. Anybody who was there was offered citizenship. 700,000 people left. And the Arab nations around them lined up on their borders and decided to attack Israel. And that is where the catastrophe, as defined by Konstantin Zurich, comes from. The catastrophe was not that these people left or homes were robbed. The catastrophe was, how did we, a nation of five Arab nations that have been founded, how did we lose to this tiny nation of Israel?
So Terry, I can't help notice the similarities when I asked you what's the agreed upon alternative events that you hear from pro-pallies. I can't help but notice that if you weren't considering context, the way you phrased their version is exactly what they would say about Christopher Columbus.
It is, and that's
It's identical. I really, like, you could just sub out the question of what do leftists think happened during our founding, and you could have said that exact same thing.
Yep, that's exactly. And so the thing is, well, they're the oppressed and the oppressor. But first of all, Palestine has had the opportunity to have their own state and be independent 4 additional times after this. And every time they've turned it down and broken a ceasefire. Again, this is not about land or independence. This is about, we don't want the Jews here.
Absolutely.
That's it. We don't want Israel here. And so if you continue to look at the quotes that we have, again, Arab leaders consistently take responsibility, and none of them say, oh, Israel has slaughtered our people. Israel has done that. That's never been said. They said, we told people to leave, and then we abandoned them, and now they're living as refugees. So you are blaming Israel for something that the Arab nations did to the Palestinians.
It was really political mismanagement on behalf of Arab leaders that Israel, and it's, what Hitler did. You blame the Jews, right? You scapegoat the Jews.
Yep. And so that's why, like I said, the first time somebody told me that, I was like, what are you talking about? That's not how Israel was founded. But again, if you go back, and that's what I've started telling people is when they say this happened, I'm like, well, not according to the people who attacked Israel, not according to the Arab leaders. And what I think, one of the things I've realized now is Yasser Arafat, who's one of the founders of the PLO, Palestinians had always been referred to as Arabs, right? And so there were Jews from the region of Palestine. There were Arabs from the region of Palestine. And so Yasser Arafat was the one who stopped calling them Arabs and started calling them the Palestinian people, separating them and making it seem like they are a unique ethnicity from other Arabs and from the Jews. They're not. And now he did that in some people say 64, some people say 67, but let's say mid-60s, right? And now there are people, I argue with them. I don't know why they come on my page, but they love to come there and argue with me, that believe Palestinians are a unique ethnicity that descended from the Canaanites. And I'm like, what? No, they're not. They are Arabs. They are from the Arabian Peninsula. And they were Arabs up until the 70s. There are no Palestinians. There are Arabs from the Palestinian territory and Jews from the Palestinian territory. But there's no ethnogenesis to back up the creation of a completely separate ethnicity of Palestinians. It's insane. And the thing is, when I argue and I tell people this and I present them evidence, like, this isn't just me argue, oh, I say this. And I'm like, here's the quotes. Here's the map. Here's what ethnogenesis is. Here's how it happened for the Jews. And the response I get is, I'm going to blow your head off, or you should take pills and kill yourself. And I'm like,
Yep.
wow, some people really hate the truth. And they're all, and I'm like, it's hilarious to me that I, a Norwegian, descendant of Norwegians who are not Jewish, and a Southerner from America, and having to have these argue, or not having to, I actually enjoy them arguing with these people, and they want to kill me. Like, okay, I mean, again, I'm in an open carry state, but whatever you want.
What's
But yeah,
what's the acronym?
insane.
It's FAFO, right?
Yeah,
Look around and
that's
find.
right. FAFO.
Yep.
But yeah, it's so. And one of the reasons I wanted to share this, Chris, is I don't think a lot of people are familiar with the Nakba. They heard it, right? And so they assume, or they don't know around the founding of Israel, or where the term came from, or what really happened. And there are other people out there fighting the good fight and going against this Hamas propaganda wing. And I want them to know the truth so they have the ability to push back on this foolishness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm seeing more and more of that happen on social media. But people need to know the truth. Israel did not invade a country called Palestine, or a land called Palestine. Jews have maintained a presence there for 3,500 years. They are the indigenous people because of an ethnogenesis that happened in Israel, creating the ethnicity of Jewishness. And Palestinians are Arabs who were brought there as part of the Arabian conquest of the Middle East. And there was no Nakba, other than the fact that the Arabs were very upset that they were not able to destroy Israel and push all the Jews into the sea. Now, there were some bad things that happened when Israel was founded. There were some soldiers that did some things they shouldn't. There were some people who, but it was not 700,000 people driven out. And again, people stayed and are now citizens of Israel and have been there for generations as well.
Well, you see, this is what the other side does with really any kind of historical analysis. They'll cherry pick examples of things that didn't go as they were supposed to. You see, they do that with Columbus. They do that with our founding. They do that with they really do that with pretty much every historical sequence. And they'll say,
if anything's wrong, it's all wrong.
Exactly. Or if you know, if a good person, if a holistically good person does one bad thing, it means they were rotten to the core. Interestingly, though, they'll say someone like George Floyd is a saint and a martyr, and they'll say that none of the bad things that he did matter, and that he's Jesus incarnate.
Yeah,
he's perfect
because he died of an overdose of fentanyl. I didn't know that makes you a saint.
So it's so backwards that they'll do anything to tarnish and warp what's good, and then hold up. I'm not even saying that George Floyd was all a bad person, but they'll ignore the bad in people that really shouldn't get that much admiration.
Oh, if you want to get a lot of hate and attention on your page on TikTok, just when somebody mentions George Floyd, all you need to do is go, the guy who died of a fentanyl overdose, and all hell will break loose. Yeah, I got a lot of, I found out today, I don't even pay attention to them, but apparently I have a lot of response videos of people very angry at me. I didn't know that.
Wait, you mean people that what, like they stitched you, or what do you mean?
Yeah, like they stitched my video and were very upset. And I mean, I've seen a few, but somebody sent me like a dozen of it. I'm like, I don't even have that many followers. I'm like, why do I have all these people angry at me? Because I really don't go on. Like when I started looking at TikTok, I didn't go on to make people mad or argue. I was just like, oh, that's not true. And foolish me, I'm like, oh, that's not true. Let me tell them the truth. And they were like, I hope you die, you horrible bitch.
Well, I've been saying this for a while now, that there's nothing to a leftist. There's nothing more violent and destructive than an alternative opinion or a dissenting opinion. They react like that, and I really think it's pathological, because they react like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're purposely trying to be dramatic. They react like that because they really truly perceive another person's opinion as being so dangerous and violent, and they really believe that. So they react as if they've actually been, as if somebody actually came to their house and murdered their family. That's how they perceive a dissenting opinion.
I mean, I was just kind of shocked because somebody was wrong and I just uploaded proof and I was like, oh, well, that's not true. And like they lost their mind. And so when I had downloaded and gotten my information together about the Nakba, I was just waiting for somebody to bring it up. Oh my God, the meltdown. Whenever I tell someone, oh, that didn't happen, you would think I ate a baby. Well, the left wouldn't care if I ate a baby in
That's
front of
true.
them. You would think that I insulted a trans person in front of them, right? You would think that I misgendered somebody. But I'm like, yeah, that didn't happen. You don't have any proof. And I'm like, well, here's the Arab leaders. Here's the guy. Here's the book, And it is glorious. That's all I'm going to tell you. I love it. Like whatever, you know what, Chris? It almost makes me as happy as when someone says the Constitution says that Black people are 3/5 of a slave. I love that argument.
Yes.
The Nakba is almost as glorious as that correction. Almost. So anyway, so feel free. Well, I know, Chris, we're going to put up an email, but if you have more questions about it or you want information, I want to empower people to tell the truth. Right.
Absolutely.
And the truth is, Israel did not invade Palestine. They did not slaughter and butcher and take out hundreds of thousands of homes from people. That is not what happened. And even the Arab leaders and the person who wrote the book calling it a Nakba does not claim that and doesn't say that that happens. So
absolutely. And speaking of, and yes, I know, and I would urge, definitely people feel free, take notes, listen to this, because some of this was new information for me too. And so I think it's great. We need to arm ourselves with the truth.
Yeah.
And speaking of the truth and what's good, we're going to end tonight. I mean, this is going to be a little bit, I don't know if people find it funny, or I think it's both funny and serious. But obviously we're talking to pro-Palestine people all the time on TikTok, but the other really contentious issue
we're talking to the Western propaganda of Hamas.
That's true. That's true.
Yes. And on Twitter, I have this one person I troll on Twitter who really hates me, but I don't care. Or X. I'm sorry, Elon, on X.
So I think the other really contentious issue out there is obviously abortion, because there's a lot of people who just love baby killing, and we're always getting back into it back and forth about what is human life, what is a person, and I don't know, Terry, if you wanted did you want to segue into this a little bit more?
I mean, I think the one thing that cracks me up whenever I get into it with pro-abortionists is, one, they don't like to be called pro-abortionists, but they are. Two, is that they want to argue that a fetus is not human life. It's not human. Okay. And I always get back, well, what species is it then? Because everything is a species and human is a species. And so to me, they want to make it very complicated about other things, but to me, it's very simple. Either you respect human life, regardless of where it's at or its age, or you don't.
And I think at best, there are people, that I think at best you could say, I respect that it is human life, but I'm acknowledging that I don't think some human life is worth protecting. That's the most truthful answer I think a pro-abortion person can give.
And if somebody said that to me, I wouldn't argue with them. I would be like, okay, well,
we have fundamental, philosophical disagreements about that, but you're being honest. I'm being honest.
Yeah. Okay. We don't agree, but you're being honest, and I'm not going to change your mind, and you're not going to change my mind.
Exactly.
But when it's not human, all right, well, now you're wrong. Okay.
Exactly.
And this is a human. Outside of assault, you have made a choice. Chris, I find the argument that women are not responsible for their bodies, that they just get pregnant or it's the man's fault, one of the most anti-feminist arguments on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
Either it's my body, my choice. Well, if it's your body, then be responsible for it.
Yeah.
You're right. And I believe it is my body. It's my choice. And if I should choose not to get pregnant. I should take responsibility and understand that sex leads to pregnancy, and this can be what happens with my decision. And so when people argue about that women are somehow, it's frustrates me to know. And I'm like, this is the most anti-feminist argument. You're yelling my body, my choice, and then you're acting like you have no control or no decision making skills.
Here's what I say: if I'm a great poker player and I have a 99% win rate in poker, if I would go into each game assuming I'm going to win, right? Because that's my track record.
Yeah.
But if I lose, and I lose, X amount of money that I gambled, I can't just hit the abort button to undo the loss. I took that risk, even though I think I'm going to win. You always have to be prepared in any decision you may make in life. You have to be prepared if things don't go according to plan. Of course, I'm not talking about rape and incest and things like that, where really, there is a victim, and regardless of what you feel about pro-life exceptions in those cases, that is a case where a woman didn't choose to have that outcome.
Exactly. Her choice was taken from her.
Exactly. But in most cases that result in pregnancy, even if you're not planning for the pregnancy, you have made a decision where pregnancy is the risk. And it's why I'm about to show a video that's so laughable. Actually, I don't know if it's one of those videos that you'd either laugh or cry, where a woman. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to describe it. I'm just going to play the video.
I'm going to give you a metaphor so maybe you can understand. Let's say that you are having a party. You're hanging out, you're having fun, and this party is at your house. And in your house, you have an attic. And you never go in your attic, and you have preventative measures to protect your attic, like it's under lock and key. Yet at your party, someone gets into your attic and you got them out. You put a restraining order on them, but little did you know that there was something in that attic. I personally wouldn't call the person, not in the real world equivalent of this analogy, but for the sake of you understanding, we're going to say a person. There's a person up in your attic and you didn't know. You didn't hear noise or anything. There's no food up there, but they've been locking themselves in and locking them out and putting your keys back where you leave them so you don't notice anything's going on. And you finally find out and you try to evict them. Well, kick them out, not evict them, but you find out you have to go through a formal eviction with the police. And that's really time consuming, or rather expensive, and hard to be able to access to even go and make that report. And now legally, that person that was hiding in your attic, that squatter, has just as much rights to your house as you do. Even though they've never paid rent, they've been eating your food, you had preventative measures there to keep anything like this from even happening. Now let me explain the analogy. The preventative measures to your attic are birth control and other contraceptives such as condoms. The next day, when you add another security measure, that's plan B, which, by the way, plan B is not effective in anyone, I think, over 170 pounds. And then there's Ella for people who weigh more than 170, but Ella goes up to like 205 or something. Anyway, you take the plan B. You've done everything right. Yeah, you still have the squatter, aka fetus, in your attic, aka uterus. Because by the time most people find out they're pregnant, they're either out of their first trimester or it's ending. And depending on what state you live in, congrats, you're out of your first trimester. You can no longer have an abortion. And so that, my friend, I hope this helps. Yeah. Can't make it any simpler.
So, well, first of all, as somebody who has just gone through the process of getting rid of a squatter, I assure you, it's not easy. Okay? You do have to go to the police and do all of that. Here's my thing. I'm assuming in her metaphor that her uterus is the attic.
Her uterus is the attic, and the squatter is the feet. Well, first of all, you don't get to just systematically execute the squatter.
God, don't I know it?
No matter how much you wish you might have been able to, you can't.
Trust me, you cannot systematically execute a squatter. I have one in Texas, remember? So, and it's been 5 months getting them out of my house. But that's a stupid metaphor.
There's something deeper in this metaphor, though. And that is that it's and this is what you see all the time with the pro-abortion people. There's a general disdain for the idea of reproduction. So it's not, she's not just talking about how, okay, it can be a beautiful thing, but it's hard on your body. She's not talking about that. She's talking about the actual life as something negative and dirty and unwanted.
Yep.
And I think the only way you can be, there are pro-choice people who are pro-choice with a lot of limits. I know a lot of people who are pro-choice, but they would say that they might even tell you it's morally wrong, but they think it's legal. Or But I think a lot of these people, though, I think in order to be in favor of unfettered abortion access until late in the term, you have to really have that disdain for life in general.
Yeah.
And you can sense that dripping off of her. She just has a disdain for the idea of motherhood.
Well, in what amazes me is, and people get so. This is another one that tends to upset people when I point this out, and they always think they're being clever. Is this whole argument of pregnancy is horrible for you? It's terrible for your body. You'll never recover. It's a parasite. Financially, it's devastating. Just all this negativity is actually from Nazi propaganda that they handed out in neighborhoods of Jewish people and European gypsies. Now, if you were a citizen of Germany, meaning you were German and you were perceived as an Aryan, no, you could not have an abortion because they wanted you to produce, and pregnancy was good, and family was good, and childhood was good. But the Third Reich did open free abortion clinics in the neighborhoods where they did not want people to reproduce, similar to Planned Parenthood. And they handed out the same talking points that we are hearing today. I mean, it is almost word for word to convince the people they did not want not to reproduce, that pregnancy was bad, family was bad, you're better off on your own. And they strongly encouraged abortion in people they didn't want. And that, I remember I was like, are you literally quoting Nazi propaganda to me right now? And I told some, the Nazis were against abortion for the people they wanted, not for the people they didn't want.
Well, that's where you get back to one of the core arguments that you always have with these people is sometimes they will admit it's a human life, but then their next talking point will be it's not a person. So then we talk about personhood. What's a person? Now, pro-life people don't make the argument. They're not pro-person. They're pro-life. So it's enough for a genuinely pro-life person. If you believe it's life, that's enough to make it worth protection. The term is pro-life, not pro-personhood. But yet somehow, and I've noticed the left and the right always get sucked into this. And so I would try to urge people who are pro-life when they're in these debates to not get sucked into the personhood debate, because that's really a diversion tactic on behalf of the pro-abortion person. It's about, is it life? And is life worth protecting? Obviously, the person you're arguing with doesn't. So you really should just be trying to get them to admit that they don't think all life's worth protecting. And then you're at an impasse and the discussion has to end. Nobody's going to convince each other. But as you're saying about the Nazi propaganda, it was all about, okay, yes, Jews, disabled people, gay people, gypsies, all of those people are humans, but they aren't deserving of personhood.
Yes, that's exactly, yes. And that is with abortion, that and I guess I call it a hardness, like you said, that disdain for human, for the unborn.
It's not even indifference. It's actual disdain. It's worse than disdain. It's disdain, exactly.
Yeah. The first time somebody called a baby a parasite, I almost passed out. I was like, I'm sorry, did you just call a human child a parasite?
Yeah, I mean,
you made a decision. That's like, and so her whole thing of they snuck into my attic. And now, if they stuck into your attic, that's assault. But you opened the attic. Yeah. That's the thing. You opened the attic. Now, you may have had some, cameras up there and trying to have some security, but the bottom line is you opened the attic, right? You made a decision. And to me, it is the height of narcissism to say that I can take the life of another human because of a choice I made. That is incredibly just narcissistic. But you're right. It's the disdain they have for that life. And the biggest problem I have with this, Chris, and I have many problems with it, is the idea of once we start saying, yes, it's human life, but it has no value because it's not born. How far are we away from, yes, it's a human life, but it has no value because they're using a wheelchair, because they have Down syndrome, because they have
They already do that with Down syndrome. People encourage. It's not just they may choose. They'll encourage abortion if the person's going to have autism or Down syndrome.
Yeah, and so the thing is, we are reaching a place where we are putting values on. And I always tell people, and I said this to them: who the hell are you to decide who has a right to live and die?
Well, I mean, just
who do you think you are?
It relates right back to the arguments we were talking about earlier. The people that you argue with about Palestine, they have no issue saying to you, I hope you kill yourself. I hope you overdose on pills, because they've determined that you're not deserving of personhood because you have a different opinion than they do.
Well, you know what? I will personhood the F out of them so they can suck it. I'm more personhood than they'll ever be.
I was just in an interaction with somebody. It was actually just like a few minutes before we started recording this podcast. I said something. I said abortion isn't a right in the Constitution. And then they said to me, healthcare is a human right, but I guess you'd have to be a human to understand that. So in other words, I'm not a human. I have a different viewpoint than them. So I'm subhuman. I'm not human. But
these are the same people who call everybody else Nazis.
I know. or they'll say misgendering is dehumanizing. They'll say something that's not even at all a denial of someone's humanity, and they'll say it's dehuman. They'll say complimenting a woman on her hairdo is dehumanizing, but it's not dehumanizing to say, I hope you kill yourself. You should overdose. I wish you were. I mean, it's really unbelievable. But that's the state. That's the state of civil discourse that we have. And I don't. And I used to be, my audience knows this on TikTok, I used to be pretty far left. And I believed at one point in unfettered abortion access. I was kind of iffy about it in like third trimester, but definitely through like the viability line, I was really fine with abortion. And I think on some level I understood that there was a moral issue, but it didn't bother me. But I think and I feel like I made the transition. I've talked with you offline about this. I feel like I made the transition into being more pro-life, kind of not because I necessarily changed my viewpoint that radically about how I viewed life, but it was seeing people who technically maybe had the same view I did on the legality have that level of disdain. And I realized, wow, most people, and maybe it was me too, and I was just in denial, but most people have to be pretty damn jaded and insensitive in order to have the position that I thought I had. And at that point I realized this cannot be the side I'm on. It just can't.
I can't associate with these people. Yeah.
Really, I probably would have had, now I would have never made a TikTok video talking like that thing on TikTok that we just watched, but I might have had the same legislative viewpoint as her, but I'm like, I can't have anything in common with that. It's just, I can't.
Yeah, I can't. You'd have to start wearing the eyelashes and dye your hair pink. And no, it's the lack of respect for human life. And it's disturbing because for all the people who scream about Nazis and fascists, and the core belief of that allowed that hideous ideology to succeed in Germany was a lack of respect for humanity and for human life. And it became, and it grew into defining, this is what a human is, this is what a person is. And if you were not that, you don't have rights. And it's disturbing the level of disdain for family and children and the innocent and the people who cannot be helped. And if you bring this up, they always come back with the Western propaganda wing of Hamas with, you don't care about the children in Palestine. I don't want any child to die, but we're not talking about that right now. And, if you are willing to not take responsibility and kill your own children, I don't really buy you have a lot of compassion. When you have disdain for the unborn, who are I remember I told someone an innocent fetus hasn't done anything, and she goes, "How are they innocent? They attacked me." I was like, "Well, this is a lost cause." I mean, you have to be next level insane
Absolutely.
to think that somebody, So anyway, it's I don't know what to tell you, Chris. All we can do is come back every week. We can dispel more myths, show how crazy these people are, and hopefully give some people some, something enjoyable to listen to. At least when I'm talking.
Absolutely. And I'll just end the broadcast on this one note that, we've talked about a lot of crazy people, how crazy the other side on a lot of these issues can be. And I'll stand by it that nothing is a better creator of new conservatives than just listening to a leftist speak. I think you can convert most people who are in the middle or even left leaning. You can get, I've always talked about my mother who's solidly, or at least was for all her life, solidly a Democrat. And she's pretty much moved to the center, and she's possibly a little bit slightly right-leaning by just me showing her leftist speaking about these issues.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh God. And it's moved her politically to see what she's sharing space with.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. And obviously, does your mother know that they refer to her as a human trafficker? Because I would imagine she would not appreciate that.
I think what really got her, I think, was because she would have considered herself like an OG first wave feminist. And when I told her that women are now bleeders and chest feeders, that really turned her off because she found that extremely dehumanizing.
I find that extremely dehumanizing, and don't call me that. And if you do, and we're in person, you're only going to call me that one time. So we're going to try out that whole USA boxing thing and see how that works out for you.
You got to be careful, Terry, because if CNN gets a hold of this clip, they're going to say you're inciting violence.
Yeah. Well, I've already done that just by telling them that the Nakba didn't happen. I've incited violence. Chris, I'm challenging you this week. I feel like I can get called a racist, a fascist, a Nazi, and get more people wanting me dead than you can.
So you know what I'm going to do? Next week, when you see us next week, we're going to compare tallies live on camera here. Who's been called more things and who's been threatened more.
I just gave you ammo to make people mad, but that's okay. I have a gift. So
okay, guys, we're going to see all of you back here next week. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm Chris Thomas. This is Terry, and you're watching All Was Right.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.